Bugatti has a problem. Not an engineering problem. Their cars remain some of the most technically astonishing machines ever built. Not a production problem. Demand for hypercars at this level has historically outpaced supply. The problem Bugatti faces right now is far more corrosive than either of those, because it lives in the minds of the exact people they need to sell to. Wealthy buyers are beginning to ask a simple but devastating question. Why spend $4 million on a car from a manufacturer that may refuse to support you the moment something goes wrong? That question is now circulating in the communities where hypercar buyers talk to each other. In private clubs, in ownership forums, in the comment sections of YouTube channels with audiences that would surprise you. And the reason it's circulating isn't rumor or speculation. It's documented, time-stamped, on-camera evidence, captured by two well-known automotive creators whose videos have collectively reached tens of millions of views. Their names are Matt Armstrong and Mark McCann, and the experiences they documented have handed Bugatti a reputational crisis that no press release can quietly walk back. Let's start with what actually happened, because the details matter enormously here. Matt Armstrong runs a channel built around ambitious restoration projects. Cars other people have written off, rebuilt through persistence, skill, and a willingness to tackle problems most shops would refuse. When he took on a Bugatti Veyron project, he approached Bugatti's dealer network to source the parts he needed for a legitimate restoration. The response he received wasn't a quote. It wasn't a waiting list or a parts availability notice. It was a refusal. Bugatti, through their dealer channels, declined to supply components for a car they themselves manufactured, a car their own engineers designed, built, and sold to a customer. Their public position went further still, suggesting that independent restoration work on a Veyron was essentially impossible without factory involvement. Matt then did what any good creator with a point to prove does. He kept working, sourced what he needed through other means, and documented the entire process on camera. The build progressed. The car came back to life. And in doing so, he produced something more damaging to Bugatti than any critical review. Proof that their claim was wrong, delivered to an audience of millions who were watching every step. Mark McCann's situation involved a different car and a different kind of failure. Mark needed basic information, specifically pricing and guidance around a gearbox repair on his Veyron. This isn't an exotic request. It's the kind of inquiry any manufacturer's customer support should be able to handle within days. Mark reached out to Bugatti and documented what followed: weeks of silence. Over a month passed without a substantive response. When communication finally came, it arrived with the explanation that Bugatti's policy on major components involves sealed unit replacement rather than repair, meaning the answer to "how much will this cost to fix?" is effectively "we won't fix it, we'll replace the whole thing, and here's the price for that." Both of these situations, taken individually, might be dismissible as edge cases. Manufacturers have policies. Policies sometimes feel harsh from the customer's perspective. That's not unusual. But taken together, and presented on camera to audiences that include the exact demographic shopping for hypercars, they stop being edge cases. They become case studies. They become the answer to the question every potential Bugatti buyer is now quietly researching: what happens when I need help? The answer those buyers are finding is this: if you don't follow Bugatti's exact process, use Bugatti's approved facilities, and pay Bugatti's prices, you may find yourself without support for a car you paid millions of dollars to own. That is a genuinely terrible value proposition, and the luxury automotive market is beginning to reflect it. Here's what's important to understand about the people who buy new Bugattis. The purchase price itself, $3, $4, $5 million depending on the model and configuration, is not typically what keeps them up at night. If a buyer is seriously considering a Chiron or a Tourbillon, that figure is within their budget almost by definition. What sophisticated buyers at this level actually think about and research carefully are the downstream realities of ownership. What happens after the wire transfer clears and the car arrives? That's the question that differentiates a smart luxury purchase from an expensive mistake. Specifically, buyers at this level are thinking about several interconnected concerns. First, repairability. If the car is damaged, whether in an accident or through mechanical failure, can it be repaired? By whom and at what cost? Second, choice. Can they select their own service facility, or are they locked into a manufacturer-controlled network? Third, geographic flexibility. What happens if they need service somewhere without a nearby authorized dealer? Fourth, modification freedom. If they want to personalize or upgrade the car, will the manufacturer cooperate or penalize them by withdrawing parts access? And fifth, resale value. Does the manufacturer's support posture help protect the investment, or does uncertainty around future serviceability erode it? Every single one of these concerns is now informed, for anyone who does basic research, by Matt Armstrong's and Mark McCann's documented experiences. And every answer currently points in the same direction. Bugatti controls access tightly. Deviation from their process risks losing support. Independent work is discouraged, publicly opposed, and in some cases made more difficult by the manufacturer's refusal to supply parts to anyone outside their authorized network. Wealthy buyers don't want to be held hostage to a manufacturer after spending $4 million. The distinction here is subtle but crucial. There's a difference between necessary dependence and forced dependence. Hypercar ownership does require specialized expertise. The engineering in a Veyron or Chiron is genuinely complex. Dual-clutch gearboxes with tolerances that demand precision, cooling systems that manage heat loads most mechanics will never encounter, engine management software that isn't comparable to anything else on the road. Nobody reasonable expects to take a Bugatti to a general repair shop and get competent service. Manufacturer expertise has genuine value at this level, and buyers understand that. What buyers don't accept, what no serious buyer at any price point should accept, is a structure where the manufacturer uses that complexity as leverage. Where the message isn't, "We have expertise that can help you," but rather, "You have no options besides us, and we'll decide whether to exercise them on your behalf." That's not a service relationship. That's a dependency relationship, and there's an enormous difference between the two in how it feels to be on the receiving end. Bugatti's competitors appear to have understood this distinction for some time. Consider Koenigsegg. Their cars occupy roughly the same performance and price territory as Bugatti's lineup, and their production volumes are similarly limited. But the ownership culture Christian von Koenigsegg has built around the brand operates on fundamentally different principles. Koenigsegg owners have direct access to the company, including in many cases to von Koenigsegg himself. The brand actively supports modifications and treats owner customization as an expression of the car's potential rather than a threat to their control. Parts access, while still specialized, doesn't come with the adversarial undertone that Bugatti's approach has developed. If a buyer is weighing a Bugatti Chiron against a Koenigsegg Jesko, both hovering around $3 million, both offering extraordinary performance, and they've watched Matt Armstrong's videos and Mark McCann's videos as part of their research, the question they're asking isn't just, which car is faster? It's, which manufacturer will treat me like a valued owner rather than a liability? Right now, based on documented evidence, the answer to that question is not Bugatti. Pagani offers another instructive contrast. Their cars are bespoke to a degree that exceeds even Bugatti's customization offerings, and Horacio Pagani has built a brand culture centered on the relationship between maker and owner. Pagani customers don't report the kind of parts stonewalling and communication failures that have defined recent Bugatti headlines. The exclusivity is, if anything, more extreme than Bugatti's. Pagani builds fewer cars at comparable or higher prices, but it doesn't come packaged with a sense that the manufacturer views the owner as someone to be managed rather than served. This is the competitive context in which Bugatti's reputational damage is occurring. It isn't happening in a vacuum where buyers have no alternatives. It's happening precisely when alternatives are clearly visible, actively competing for the same buyers, and demonstrably better at the aspects of ownership that Bugatti is currently failing. Now let's talk about why the YouTube dimension of this crisis is structurally different from any customer service controversy Bugatti might have navigated in the past. Bugatti's traditional method of controlling their narrative relied on restricting access. Only approved journalists drove the cars for sanctioned reviews. Only authorized channels received official information. The brand's exclusivity was mirrored in its communication strategy, carefully curated, tightly controlled, presented through channels Bugatti could influence. That approach worked well in a media environment where getting your message out required relationships with gatekeepers, and where negative stories faded from memory relatively quickly because there was no permanent, searchable, highly watched record of them. YouTube destroyed that model entirely. Matt Armstrong's Bugatti videos don't just exist. They accumulate views continuously, get recommended to new audiences algorithmically, and surface whenever anyone searches for information about Bugatti ownership, Veyron restoration, or hypercar reliability. They are permanently indexed, permanently accessible, and permanently influential. A potential buyer researching a Chiron purchase in 2027 will find these videos exactly as easily as someone researching today. The documentation doesn't age out. It doesn't get buried by subsequent good news. It sits in search results waiting to be discovered by every new buyer who does their homework. Mark McCann's series on his Veyron has built an audience that follows the car's story chapter by chapter. When he showed himself making calls to Bugatti that went unanswered, and then documented the eventual response explaining the sealed unit replacement policy, he wasn't writing a blog post that might get a few thousand readers. He was creating a serialized, emotionally engaging narrative that hundreds of thousands of people watched with genuine investment in the outcome. That audience didn't just watch, they formed opinions about Bugatti based on what they saw. And a significant portion of that audience is precisely the demographic that buys or aspires to buy cars at this price point. When Bugatti's leadership released a response video addressing the independent repair controversy, they compounded the problem rather than resolving it. Instead of acknowledging the disconnect between their support practices and owner expectations, the response reinforced their position that independent work on Bugatti vehicles isn't something they endorse or facilitate. That video now exists as a permanent, official statement from Bugatti's leadership opposing the kind of independent ownership that Matt Armstrong represents. Every time someone searches for Bugatti owner support or Bugatti parts availability, there's a reasonable chance they'll find both the original documentation of the problem and Bugatti's official confirmation that their position on it is what it appeared to be. This is the information environment that surrounds a prospective Bugatti purchase today. It isn't theoretical damage. It isn't based on second-hand accounts or unverified rumors. It's based on camera footage, official corporate communications, and responses from Bugatti's own representatives, all of it indexed, searchable, and continuously accumulating views. The financial implications for Bugatti are worth examining carefully because their business model is unusually exposed to exactly this kind of reputational pressure. Bugatti is not a volume manufacturer. They produce hundreds of cars per year, not hundreds of thousands. That's a deliberate choice that supports their exclusivity positioning and allows them to charge prices that no volume manufacturer could sustain. But it also means that every individual sale carries enormous financial weight. The Tourbillon, Bugatti's current flagship, starts at approximately $4 million before options, and configured versions can push well beyond that figure. The margin on each car is substantial, but the revenue base is narrow. In a volume business, losing 5 or 10% of potential buyers to reputational concerns is painful but manageable. Revenue from other segments compensates. Inventory adjusts. The damage is real but distributed. In Bugatti's business, a 20 to 30% softening in purchase intent among the audience they're trying to reach translates directly and immediately into meaningful lost revenue. Losing even a handful of Tourbillon sales per quarter, sales that might otherwise have occurred but didn't because a prospective buyer watched Mark McCann's series and decided to look at a Koenigsegg instead, represents millions of dollars in consequences. But the financial damage doesn't stop with lost new sales. It extends into the used market in ways that affect Bugatti's entire ownership community, including people who already bought their cars and have no intention of selling anytime soon. Used Bugatti values depend substantially on buyer confidence in manufacturer support. When someone purchases a pre-owned Chiron, they're not just buying the car as it exists today, they're buying into an assumed future where parts remain available, where the manufacturer will engage with service needs, and where the ownership experience maintains some connection to the brand that built it. If that confidence erodes, if buyers believe that Bugatti may refuse parts requests, may ignore service inquiries for extended periods, and publicly opposes independent work on their vehicles, Used car values respond accordingly. The premium that a pre-owned Bugatti commands over other high-performance cars is not purely mechanical. It's reputational. And reputations that damage new car sales also damage the secondary market. This creates a downward spiral that's genuinely difficult to arrest once it gains momentum. Lower residual values make new purchases less financially rational. Reduced purchase rates lower the production volumes that sustain Bugatti's development budgets. Declining production exclusivity. If Bugatti were ever forced to consider increasing volume to compensate for falling per-unit demand, would undermine the scarcity positioning that justifies their pricing structure. Every element of the problem feeds back into every other element. Bugatti's leadership is presumably aware of this dynamic, which is what makes their strategic position at this moment so consequential. They have a meaningful choice to make, and the window for making it on favorable terms may be narrowing. The most constructive path forward would involve a genuine shift in how Bugatti thinks about the relationship between manufacturer and owner after the point of sale. Concretely, that might mean establishing clear, public criteria under which independent restoration work is supported rather than opposed, specifying which components can be sourced through the dealer network, what documentation independent shops need to provide, and how Bugatti will engage with restoration projects that fall outside their authorized service channels. It might mean committing to response time standards for owner inquiries, eliminating the kind of month-long communication silence that McCann documented. It might mean creating a transparent policy around parts availability for older models, giving owners clarity about what they can expect as their cars age out of warranty. None of these changes would require Bugatti to abandon the quality standards that make their engineering credible. They wouldn't need to supply parts to unqualified operators or endorse work that could compromise safety. But they would require acknowledging that ownership, genuine ownership, means something different from what Bugatti's current policies imply. A car that costs $4 million and comes with a manufacturer relationship that effectively continues to control how it can be used and serviced isn't fully owned by the person who paid for it. That's a problem, and increasingly, buyers are recognizing it as one before they sign the purchase agreement rather than after. It's also worth noting that regulatory pressure is moving in a direction that will eventually force some version of this reckoning regardless of what Bugatti chooses to do voluntarily. Right to repair legislation has been gaining traction across multiple jurisdictions, with the European Union advancing frameworks that would require manufacturers to make parts and diagnostic information available to independent operators at fair terms. Bugatti will not be exempt from these requirements if they become law, and the direction of travel suggests they will. The question is whether Bugatti implements what those regulations will require as a voluntary expression of customer commitment, or waits until legal compulsion removes their choice in the matter. Doing it voluntarily and doing it now would offer something that regulatory compliance never can: the narrative that Bugatti heard their owners, took the criticism seriously, and chose to change course because they genuinely value the ownership experience they provide. That story, told through the same YouTube channels that currently document their failures, would be genuinely powerful. Matt Armstrong completing a Bugatti restoration with manufacturer cooperation rather than opposition would be a very different video than the one he made. McCann receiving prompt, helpful responses from Bugatti's support team would be a very different series than the one he's currently producing. Both of those outcomes are achievable, and both would reach the same audiences that are currently receiving an entirely different message. The harder question is whether Bugatti's leadership can move past the institutional resistance that luxury brands often have toward admitting that their approach requires recalibration. Prestige brands are particularly prone to a specific kind of organizational rigidity, a belief that the standards they've established are inherently correct, and that customer criticism reflects a misunderstanding of those standards rather than a legitimate grievance with them. That belief is understandable. It's also, in this case, mistaken, and the market is beginning to make that clear in ways that are difficult to dismiss. The luxury automotive market is undergoing a broader shift in what buyers expect from the brands they invest in at the highest levels. Transparency is increasingly valued over mystique. Customer empowerment is increasingly expected over customer management. The idea that a manufacturer's obligations end at the point of sale, that after payment, the brand's role is to protect its own processes rather than serve the person who now owns the product, is becoming progressively less acceptable to buyers who have choices, who do research, and who talk to each other in communities that Bugatti cannot control or curate. Koenigsegg understands this. Pagani understands this. Several newer entrants to the extreme hypercar market, brands building around community and transparency rather than exclusivity and gatekeeping, are building their value propositions explicitly in contrast to the approach that Bugatti currently represents. Bugatti's engineering heritage is real. The Veyron was a genuine technological achievement when it launched, and the Chiron and Tourbillon continue that tradition of building machines that push the boundaries of what's mechanically possible. That heritage has genuine value, and it would be a shame to watch it erode because of corporate policies that have nothing to do with the cars themselves and everything to do with how the brand has chosen to manage the relationship with the people who buy them. But heritage doesn't protect a brand indefinitely if the ownership experience it's paired with stops meeting buyer expectations. Rolls-Royce learned to evolve. Porsche learned to evolve. Ferrari, which once had its own adversarial reputation with owners around modifications and resale restrictions, has developed more nuanced approaches over time, not abandoning their standards, but finding ways to apply them that feel less like punishment and more like partnership. Bugatti has the same opportunity. Whether they take it as a decision that will define the next chapter of what the brand actually means, not in engineering terms, where their credentials are unquestionable, but in human terms, which is ultimately where all brand value actually lives. The cars will keep getting faster. The question is whether the people they're built for will keep choosing to buy them.